it's Goldie. I'm back. We're going to be making this concrete backdrop or wall you can use for your dioramas or your dolls. Let's go. So I've listed this exact item down below, but if you have a Home Depot near you, this is the exact foam board that I use. They do have them in large 4x8 sheets, and they also have them what are called project boards, which are these little squares here, and you can get them right in the same aisle. They're $8.97. The price has went up, so stock up while you can. All right, so I'm gonna grab some of this white paint. I'm gonna mix it with some black. We're gonna create a slight gray. Once you've got a gray tone that you like, you're going to put that aside. We're going to work on our texture. So I'm going to take a sheet of foil and I'm going to scrunch it into a ball and just texture the hell out of this foam board. So I have a reference photo on my computer that I'm looking at, and with natural concrete, there's a lot of striations and indentations in the concrete that I'm trying to kind of manipulate. So I'm going to just use this foil to create those indentations where I see fit. Some I'm using a little bit harder pressure, and then some areas I'm using lighter texture, but it's really intuitive. So once you get going, you'll feel where you need to push harder and push lighter. If you've seen my last videos on this series working with this foam paneling, you'll really get a gauge on how you can manipulate this material. And so a lot of the technique here is just kind of digging in where you need to and pulling back where you need to. So I'm going to take some of this paint that I mixed and I'm going to coat the whole entire thing. So with this first coat, you can water it down just a little bit, but you do want it to be thick enough to get into those indentations and crevices, because we're at the end, we're going to push the paint into those crevices as much as possible so that the lavender material doesn't show through. So with this foam paneling, it's all about layering as much as possible, and that's going to give you a more realistic finish. So this video is pretty long. I'm going to try to speed it up as much as possible, but to give you a gist of how many different layers will create the more realistic look, the better it's going to look at the end. So take your time with the layering. And then I'm going to go ahead and take a wet paper towel and I'm going to smear all of this in. And you do want to get the majority of the paint off. We're just coating it just enough to get into those divots. So you're going to push down into those divots, into the striations that you made as much as possible. I know it's hard to get a gauge on how hard I'm pushing, but I'm pushing really hard into these little crevices to get the paint in there. Okay, so now I'm going to take another piece of foil. I'm going to texture it even further, create some more divots, create some more definition into this foam. And then another little trick that I've learned is to take a rolling pin and further texture it to get a little bit more of a definition into it. I'm just using it to go all around in different areas, and it'll give it even more of definition. Then you can take the foil and push down and twist. This will give it little divots that will create little like cracks and more striations that are more realistic to real concrete. Now that I have some heavy texture, I'm going to take some lighter color paint. It's the same colored gray, added some white, and I'm going to take a really heavy thistled brush, and I'm going to put the paint where I just made those really deep indents. It's at this point that it may look a little crazy, but don't worry. As always, it's all about layering here. So we're going to take something like a sponge or a paper towel, and we're going to blot it around. And then while it's wet, we're going to blot it, and then it's going to kind of create some definition within these layers. So don't worry if it looks crazy at first. Just trust the process. As it's drying, it's going to kind of fade in together and look really nice. And as you can see, it's slightly coming together, but we need a little bit more texture, so we're going to keep going. A little tip here, as you're working, it's best to work while the paint is still damp. We don't want anything to dry. So I'm adding some grout ready mixed grout to this already leftover paint that I have, and I'm going to smear it into those cracks, into the really deep divots that I've created. And I'm using a palette knife to do this, but you can definitely use your hands. I'm an advocate for using your hands because we just have that natural gauge of material thickness within our fingertips. But I'm just going to add that all around. And then again, I'm going to take a sponge, a damp sponge, and I'm going to twist and pull the material in and out of those cracks. And what this is going to do is it's going to add some further texture into those cracks and also onto the surface, because grout has those little sand bits that make it more realistic, like concrete. Preferably use a sponge that has some texture to it, so it's going to work with your material. All right, so see, this is my sponge. I'm going to take it as a damp sponge now. As the material is slightly drying, I'm going to just dab all around, and this is going to pull up those little grout bits, and I'm going to smooth it down in certain areas, because natural concrete has certain areas that are kind of smooth and then other areas that are kind of more gritty. Now, having a construction background, I like to use real construction materials because it does give you a more natural feel, especially when you are working with many materials. You want it to have a more realistic look. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to dab it all around, and when you're working with grout, it will dry very fast. So I'm going to take a very stiff brush, and I'm going to just stipple it all around there, all around where I see fit. Yes, we are coming along here. Now you can stop at any point, but like I said, the layers are really going to add the whole realistic look here. So I'm going to add some white paint with a little bit of water, and I'm going to take that same stiff brush and just brush it into the cracks where I see fit. One of the key things to remember here is when you are adding paint, you want to work while the paint is wet, and you want to blend while the paint is wet. So I'm going to take a baby wipe and just smear it all around and make sure that I'm blending as it's still damp. It's at this point that you should be pretty proud of yourself and your work. I'm going to take a needle tool and just add some cracks and some little definition marks here and there, and then I'm just going to smear it. The work is almost done, but I think it needs just a little bit more texture. So I'm going to add some more little white grout here and there with my fingertips and just feather it in where I see fit. So your reference photo is going to give you all the details that you need. Mine is a little bit heavier textured, so I'm going to go ahead and add that grit all over the place. I like that heavy texture, so you just go ahead and texture exactly where you need according to your aesthetic and your style. This is just about done, and once it's dry, it will look something like this. Hopefully you've enjoyed this tutorial and you can use it for your dolls or dioramas. If you've liked, please like it and subscribe. I'll see you next time. Bye.